Morning, good afternoon, good evening. This is Wilbert Mukori. This is a cartoon, a very common one. How many times have we seen cartoons or stories in which we are made to believe that the opposition is winning elections in Zimbabwe? Very common. The irony is, of course, that Zanu PF has always prevailed. Zanu PF has managed to stay in power for the last 43 years and counting. And yet, every time we are made to believe that the opposition, this is their time, this time they will win. Or as Chamisa himself will put it, Triple C will win big. And yet, again and again, that has failed to become a reality. It's what we call reverse psychology. Make the individual believe they are winning, even when they are not. I think the most outstanding example of this was during the GNU of 2008 to 2018. The GNU was supposed to be a golden opportunity for Zimbabwe to implement the democratic reforms, which are supposed to end the Zanu PF carte blanche dictatorial powers to rig elections. How is it possible that in 5 years, the MDC guys failed to implement even one token reform in 5 years? And for some of you who are not familiar with the process of implementing the reforms, anyone, any MP, any senator, any minister, any deputy minister, and there were 2 deputy prime ministers, plus the prime minister himself, Morgan Tsvangirai, could submit a reform proposal. So how is it that in 5 years of the GNU, not even one of the MDC leaders submitted reform proposals? To count them, there were over 110 MDC MPs, over 30 ministers and deputy ministers, then plus the 2 deputy prime ministers and the prime minister himself. All those people, any one of them could submit a reform proposal in Parliament or in the Senate. And yet, not even one of them did that in 5 years. This is not in 5 days or 5 weeks or 5 months, 5 years. I think this is one of the biggest feats that political feats that anyone has pulled off. How Mugabe managed to con the MDC leaders to forget about reforms, beggars belief. Yes, of course, he bribed them. That was the main thing. But you cannot also deny that these guys were unbelievably corrupt and incompetent. And one of the ways Mugabe managed to persuade them to forget about the reforms is convincing them that MDC was going to win the next election, even if they failed to implement even one token reform. And this theme has been maintained ever since. Every election, the opposition has gone into those elections claiming that they would win. And of course, the media and Zanu PF operatives have taken the center stage in cheering the opposition into believing that they definitely don't need any reforms. They are going to win these elections. And one of the most common arguments that we've heard from the opposition is that aura mwiri munda makudo. You are not going to abandon the fields to the marauding baboons, they've argued. In other words, they had to participate in these elections because they cannot allow Zanu PF to have the elections without them. The truth of the matter is that is all just nonsense. The most important argument there is during the GNU itself. Why did MDC fail to implement even one token reform? Keep on arguing that Aura Mwiri Munda Makudo is totally nonsensical. They were in the GNU. The primary purpose of the GNU was to implement the reforms. Why did they fail to implement the reforms? That is a question that must be asked and must be answered. "5 years. Why did you fail to implement reforms?" When they realized that they'd failed to implement the reforms, the truth of the matter is Morgan Tsvangirai and company decided they were going to continue participating as long as they get some of the spoils of the election. And that is one thing that Robert Mugabe had learned during the GNU. As long as the opposition are given the opportunity to win a few of the gravy train seats, they will continue participating in these elections. As long as the few leaders believe they can win, they can win some of the seats, they will participate, no matter how flawed the process gets. And that is exactly what has been happening. But they've used the reverse psychology on their own supporters. Triple C leaders have never, ever gone out to their members and say, well, we are participating in these elections out of greed. Of course not. They've told them they're participating because they're convinced they're going to win. And they've even argued, as Chamisa did before these 2023 elections, that he had plugged all the vote rigging holes. So Zanu PF could not rig these elections because he had plugged the vote rigging holes. So Chamisa himself has been at the forefront. In fact, all the opposition leaders have been at the forefront, try to convince their followers that yes, the elections are flawed, but we are going to win these flawed elections. We've devised ways of winning rigged elections, and hence justifying their hell-bent commitment to participating in these elections, regardless of how flawed the process got. So in this particular case, it really has been an interesting development in the sense that we now have a situation where, regardless what happens, the opposition will participate in these elections, regardless what happens, which is tragic. In fact, soon after the 2013 election, people like David Coulthard admitted that the process itself is so flawed, so illegal, it really doesn't make any sense to keep on participating. This is a quotation from his book. So for somebody to keep on arguing this, auramwile makudo munda, is totally meaningless. If the process itself is so flawed, so illegal, that the result is predetermined, and you know it, that's number one. Number two, you also know that by participating, you're giving the process legitimacy. You're giving Zanu PF, the vote rigging Zanu PF, legitimacy. Surely, the only logical thing to do is not to participate. But that message has been drowned out by Triple C leaders and supporters alike because they are hell-bent on participating. For the leaders, of course, it's because they are after the few gravity seats that Zanu PF is offering as bait. For the naive, gullible, and downright stupid supporters, they believe the opposition leaders, whatever they say. This is one of the tragedies with our political system. The electorate are naive, ignorant, and very gullible. And unfortunately, they have the vote. The Greeks, or those now nearly 2,500 years ago, when they came up with this idea of democracy, they were absolutely right. What they said is democracy will only work if if the people are educated, informed, and diligent. What's the point of giving somebody power when they haven't got the knowledge with which to exercise that power? What's the point of giving somebody a choice when they do not know or understand the options before them? This is why democracy has not worked in Africa. Zanu PF has seen to it that they would not allow the people to be educated. When we gained our independence, we had a media which was meant to keep the whites informed and the blacks misinformed. The white regime in Zimbabwe was ruthless in trying to silence all the media outlets that covered that informed or educated the blacks. Notable publications like Motto were always being harassed. In fact, the priest based in Kweru, who was responsible for the publication, was deported by the Smith regime. If he had been a black person, no wonder he would have been thrown in jail a long time before he was deported. After independence, Robert Mugabe inherited the media and he started running the main publications, the Herald, the Chronicle, ZBC, and so forth, just the same way as the whites had done to serve the ruling elite. The Minister of Information in Zimbabwe has always been to make sure that the media says what the government of the day wants it to say. And after independence, we had a few independent publications. And they too were subjected to the same harassment as Ian Smith has subjected Motto and other in the black publications serving the black population. So the populace in Zimbabwe have not been well informed. So they've remained ignorant, naive, and gullible. And so it is easy for the opposition to prey on them as well. Of course, when Chamisa was claiming that he had plugged all the vote rigging loopholes, he knew he was lying. As we know, all the election observers in the August election condemned the whole process as a farce, including the continental body, AU, the regional body, SADC, and even Zimbabwe's own Zimbabwe Human Rights Commission condemned the process as a farce. But that didn't stop Chamisa claiming that he was going to win the elections. In some of his comments, he claimed that he had plugged all the vote rigging holes. In others, he acknowledged the process is flawed, but he was going to win it anyway. God is in it, he claimed. So we have ended up with this ridiculous situation where we are forever claiming one thing and yet something else is happening. We're claiming that we are not going to abandon the fields to the marauding baboons. But when you look at the reality on the ground, Zanu PF has been winning these elections for the last 43 years and counting. I think it is clear here that we have got a regime that is prepared to allow the opposition to describe it as the marauding baboons, to encourage them to participate in these elections, regardless how flawed the process gets. And yet, at the end of the day, it is the marauding baboons that win. That is reverse psychology. at its worst. And I think the people of Zimbabwe need to wake up to that reality. We do not need to participate in an election process that is so flawed that the results are predetermined. That's number one. Number two, participate in a process which you know by participating, you're giving the process legitimacy. Rules are there for a purpose. If Zanu PF is not prepared to produce a verified voters roll, then why are we participating? What is the point of coming up with rules like we must have a verified voters roll? If those tasked to produce a verified voters roll can discard it, can forget it, we are not going to have a verified voters roll, and we still participate. What is the motivation for the ruling party to honor that obligation to produce a verified voters roll? The most important distinction here is that the opposition have really, ever since the GNU, have really become Zanu PF's junior partners. Throughout the GNU, they were willing to go along with Zanu PF as long as they enjoyed some of the benefits of being on the gravy train. And ever since the GNU, they've realized, okay, we are not going to have any reforms. We will not be able to implement any reforms. But as long as we are going to get a few seats, we are willing to participate in these flawed elections. And that's what they've been doing. But they've used reverse psychology on their own supporters, on the ordinary people, by convincing them, trying to convince them that they will win rigged elections. I think what people of Zimbabwe must reject now is this nonsensical view that you can win rigged elections. That is nonsensical. We want free, fair, and credible elections. We want elections to follow the fundamental guidelines. The SADC report was very clear. These 2023 elections were flawed and illegal. And I think what the people of Zimbabwe should be saying now is that we are tired of participating in flawed and illegal elections. We want elections that are free, fair, and credible, that meet SADC's guidelines and principles and internationally accepted rules. The fact that CCC want to participate regardless is a way of cheating the ordinary people. It's because CCC are participating because they already know that they will have something out of it. It's us, the ordinary people, who are being cheated here. The idea that Auramwile Munda Makudo is totally meaningless when at the end of the day, the people whom you are referring as Makuda are the ones who end up winning. The real Gudo here, the real baboon here, is you, who is being conned into believing that you don't need free, fair, and credible elections to have change. No, we need it. We should be smart enough to say, no, the rules are there for a purpose. If we keep on participating in these flawed elections, we only have ourselves to blame for it. We cannot expect SADC to step in and help us when we are the one who are insisting in participating in flawed elections. That is another problem that we have here. By participating in the August elections, knowing fully well that the process is flawed, what message were we sending out there? That we are happy with the flawed process. We are happy with the illegal process because we think we can win it. Zanu PF will never lose an election in which they've got carte blanche powers to rig. Many people believe Mnangagwa must have spent at least 5 billion US dollars in these recent elections. From all the busing of those hired crowds and feeding them with chicken and chips, to buying trucks for all the chiefs and all the mid-ranking officials, church leaders, and so forth, right up to paying the 400,000 US dollars bribe to all the country's judges and all high-ranking officials. He must have spent at least $5 billion US dollars. This is a country that is incredibly poor. Right now, the country is facing a serious problem of cholera because we don't have clean drinking water. And yet the country has just been spent $5 billion on elections. This is a problem of our own making. We really cannot be conned into believing that somehow Zanu PF are the baboons, and we should keep on participating in flawed elections because at Ngaramwiri, the marauding baboons the field. Whereas where in reality, by participating, we are giving Zanu PF legitimacy. That's all we are doing. They are quite happy to let us believe, as in this cartoon here, seeing the Zanu PF candidate with one eye closed, swollen up, bleeding, make us believe that the opposition is winning. We are on the verge of winning, when in reality we are not. These by-elections are totally, utterly meaningless. The whole reason for the by-elections was because Triple C, Chamisa, in his infantile wisdom, had decided that he was not going to have a proper constitution, properly elected officials, and therefore then one member comes up and saying, oh, I'm the Secretary General, and I'm recalling all these people. And this circus has only just begun. And this is a circus of Triple C's own making. Just as much as the participating in these flawed elections is Triple C's own making. Just as the failure to implement even one meaningful reform during the GNU was the opposition's own making. We, the people of Zimbabwe, need to wake up to that reality. The most important thing now is that the people of Zimbabwe should put their foot down and say, no, we are not going to participate in the elections that are flawed and illegitimate. We want to see reforms implemented so that the elections are free, fair, and credible. Those rules are there for a purpose. And we should not be conned by people like Chamisa into believing that we can still win rigged elections. No, we don't want rigged elections. We want free, fair, and credible elections. That is my main message to you tonight. Thank you very much for listening, and good night.